Hey guys, welcome back to the Gulf Coast Growth Show. I'm your host, Jason Lee, joined with my co-host, Zeke Smith.
What's up, Jason?
Great to see you today.
Yes,
and
sir.
We are blessed to have Ryan Sitton, the CEO and founder of Pinnacle. And you ditched the, did y'all ditch the ART? Or was
man, you have a good memory.
I have
First it was
great,
AIS, then it was ART,
and
now it's
just Pinnacle. Okay,
yeah.
so
we're like, you know what? We're going to take the whole thing.
Yeah, like
golf balls, vodka.
We're like
Pinnacle.
Prince.
Artist formerly known. That's right.
And then former railroad commissioner. And I think one of the things that I think has always given you such great gifts is the fact that you've not served only in legislation and your ability to kind of connect at that level, but also having been a business owner, an operator, somebody who's functioning in the world of business day in and day out. I think it gives you kind of a unique position to share a voice for both, really from both sides of the aisle, which I think is a blessing. So we're glad to have you here today. Ryan, talk to us first and foremost for our audience, just a real quick snapshot. Tell us a little bit about who you are, your business, kind of your history, and then how you got here.
Oh, man. So I'm going to go for a while on this.
Okay.
No, I'll try to be efficient.
Try to do it like my prayer.
Okay. All right. I'm an engineer, came out of college. Graduated Texas A&M, mechanical engineering. And I start with that because like most kids coming out of college, this is back into the 90s, man, you go work in industry somewhere. I would guess that out of A&M at that time, 75%, 80% of mechanical engineers were going to work somewhere in an industry. You know, you were going to work, and mostly big companies, right? Exxon's. I went to Oxy out of college. My wife went to Lyondell. You were going to Boeing. You were all big companies. And that was not only indicative of the time in terms of kind of what the mindset was of kids at the time, but it was also just indicative of where industry was going, man. Even though at the end of the 90s, you might remember there was a bit of a slowdown going on, especially in chemicals, but man, it was staff up. These companies were building big organizations. They were recognizing the transition and, oh man, we got baby boomers that are retiring. And so we got to ramp up all the staffing. I'll park that because when we start talking about current landscape today, it's amazing how different that is from today. But I'll start there. Got out of college, went to work for Oxy, had basically 3 jobs. Worked for Oxy, then were there a couple of years, went to Marathon, worked there a couple of years, all in reliability, mechanical and engineering type stuff. My third job was for a small consulting company called Berwanger, which would end up selling about 5 years later to the big multinational Siemens. And then in 2006, I started Pinnacle.
Nice.
And here we sit almost 20 years later, and I've run that company ever since. As you said,
right.
I did a brief stint. I say brief. It was 6 years in public service as a railroad commissioner. And I'm sure most of your audience knows, but in case they don't, that's the energy regulator for the state of Texas, regulating oil wells and pipelines. And then 2020, when COVID was crashing the world, I also was getting out of that and coming back to be the CEO of Pinnacle, where I am still today.
So you've consistently been leaned on over the years, both at this organization and across the state. And time doesn't go by when I don't see you on some type of panel or at some type of speaking event. And it's typically around energy and or it's around, really energy combined with your ability to understand and analyze data, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the thing that I think I value most about you is you're not going to say it unless you're going to back it up.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
That's which is a huge value, and I think it speaks back to your business, and we'll talk about that shortly. But talk to us a little bit about really how you defined or how that became your what is it that set that as your champion voice, right? Because you became a voice of that out in the marketplace. How is it that catalyst started, and then how has that momentum built? Like, what are people reaching out to you about today regarding the things you talk about?
That's a great prompt, and especially in today's world, it's interesting. If you'd have looked back at Pinnacle all the way back in 2006, when you started Pinnacle, what were you guys doing? And we were going into plants and we were building mechanical integrity programs. Now, to most people, they're like, "What is that?" Bunch of nerds in a closet, obviously. We were going into plants and we were saying, "You've got all this data." This is 20 years ago. And we're going into databases, we're going into file folders, going to people's drawers, and we're pulling out stuff that's in documents, it's in old spreadsheets, it's in Lotus 1, 2, 3, literally. Like we're pulling data anywhere we can find it. And we're putting that data into fairly today antiquated calculation tools to predict risk and when you need to inspect, when you need to do maintenance.
Nice.
And it's funny, if you'd asked me at the time, and if I'd have told you, hey, Ryan, imagine you're 2006, 7, 8. Someone said to you, hey, Ryan, what's Pinnacle doing? I said, man, we're data analytics. People would have been like, oh, that sounds awful.
Right.
Like really.
Yeah.
And fast forward 20 years, it's like the sexy thing.
Right.
Right. And we were doing that before it was cool.
Right.
And we have evolved with that, and I've evolved with that as the leader of that organization to not just continue to pull data together and run analyses, but make those analyses more and more advanced.
Right.
So imagine you're running here we are sitting in the epicenter of industrial processing. Really, the Houston Ship Channel is underappreciated. I mean, you guys do, but the amount you drive over the Ship Channel Bridge, you look out both sides, you're like, man, as far as the eye can see, it's the most advanced, most complex, most fully constructed industrial complex, arguably on Earth. And people don't realize that's right here in Houston, Texas. Right. And there are literally millions of pieces of equipment that all have to work together to make us produce all this stuff that gets shipped in and out of the Houston port every day.
Mind-blowing.
It's mind-blowing. And some of these plants have 10,000 different pieces of machinery, and any one of them goes down, and all the other 9,999 are less valuable.
And they don't stop running.
They try not to, right? Yeah, that's their thing. They're trying to run all the time.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's a long way of answering your question, Jason. So the challenge has been, Ryan, the landscape's getting more and more competitive. We've got trillions of pieces of data. How do we use that to help make pinpoint decisions real time, faster and faster? And that's just been what we do every day. And so back to your prompts, Ryan, you're speaking on this all the time. Well, man, that same mindset, how do you use that data to get better insights? Well, that's not just in an industrial facility. That's in energy markets, as you've heard me speak. That's in commodity markets. Where do you buy beef today? It's in construction markets. What's the price of lumber and the price of labor?
Steel.
I mean, everywhere is challenged with this today. And so that's been what I keep thinking that way, and people keep asking me to talk about it.
Right. Well, and it hasn't stopped, right? And I guess the thing that strikes me is that a few years ago when you were on the show, it was around COVID, and then we had did a separate discussion about a book that you wrote. Mm-hmm. And I'm just thinking at that time, that book, I took the opportunity to read the book. It's called Crucial Decisions?
Yeah.
Fantastic book. And it spoke a lot about where you guys were going and the vision that you had. And then I thought, how outdated is even that book with how rapidly things are moving? How much work goes into your ability to stay out in front?
We just killed any opportunity to sell the book today.
No, I'm sorry. I wasn't trying. I'm not trying to.
We got an autographed copy. We saw it. I think
I'm saying the book itself fundamentally makes a lot of sense.
It
right?
used to be great.
That's awesome.
Everybody's going to benefit from the book.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying
it's really a timeless story.
I'm saying the data component, right? Yeah. I'm talking about specifically data. When you were analyzing data just 3 years ago, and then now how rapidly the need for data and how it's shifting and how you go about gathering that data.
Yeah.
The need for it and how you're going to analyze things is what the book's about. It's about making the decisions with data.
Yep.
But how you go about getting the data is constantly evolving.
That's right.
And so is what I was trying to say is just 3 years ago, that was a horrible play.
No, it was not. Yeah, I'm gonna.
Yeah.
I actually love the fact that we joked about that
this
because
is going to be weird because I'm going to get the lawsuit check, not the royalty check. It's
That's right.
Here's,
there you go. Yeah.
This check's
Thank
already.
you for having me on.
Book sales plummeted after today.
Exactly.
I'll share with you. Here's some data.
Yeah.
Something like 80% of your book sales happen in the first 6 months. So when you look at how many copies of Crucial Decisions sell, it's few, right? I'll go on this show, a couple copies will be sold. And it's not because the book is not timeless. It's just the nature of book sales.
Sure.
So interesting piece of data on how most books work. Interestingly enough, and I love that we joked about that because there is both, and I don't even talk about Crucial Decisions. Let's talk about how human beings work. Even though, yes, how we use data is because let's talk about ChatGPT, which didn't even exist when I wrote that book.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
You go on to ChatGPT today and you ask ChatGPT a question. Hey, ChatGPT, what's the best pair of running shoes to buy?
Right.
And it's going to give you an incredibly thoughtful answer. It's going to give you a bunch of options. It's going to talk about what things, if you're thinking based on cost, it'll be this. If you're thinking based on fit, this. How many miles you're going to run based on this. It's going to give you an answer. And you're going to more than likely hop on Amazon and say, I'll buy that.
Right.
Interestingly enough about human beings, we want to have a simple decision process. It gets way into the weeds a little bit, but it's funny that we would talk about this way. Human beings, I don't care whether you're talking about how to raise kids, where to send them to school, what pump to replace in your refinery, where to buy a home. I mean, human beings, when you throw a complicated decision at somebody, for 99% of the population, their stress level goes off the charts.
Brain.
Oh, yeah. It blows your mind.
Absolutely.
So people want a simple decision process, which is why people love ChatGPT. Interesting thing about ChatGPT, Gemini, all the generative AI tools.
Yep.
They are trying to continually refine the front end of those tools to give people a simple yet thorough answer.
Right.
In other words, The complicated part of generative AI is not the algorithms running in the background. It's how to make it feel like you went to the doctor and you said, this hurts, and he says, take this pill.
Right.
That is what people want.
Right.
And so the thought process is as old as time, even though the analytics are getting more and more complicated. So back to that book talked a lot more about the thought process. So in some ways it's timeless. And yet if you look into the data, the way I talked to you, remember I sampled COVID data a lot in there.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, now that's old news. That was like 5 years ago. Who gives a crap, right? So in some ways that part's outdated. And while we think about how human beings work we're still struggling with that.
The sweet irony of that, right, is the ChatGPT example you used is you're overwhelmed. We're overwhelmed by the amount of data and choices, to your point. But we're using an application that is all they're doing is taking a ton of data, which we already have access to, and making it here. So now you have two options.
Yeah.
Everyone, you hear so many people talking today, I'm overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed. It's like the access to that data is so complex, and it doesn't stop like our plants or refineries. And so all they want to do, like to your point, is just, all right, just give me this or this and let me make a choice. I mean, it's so, and that is, the book joke was hilarious, and our 6 listeners are definitely not going to buy it. But no, and that's what it is. Because every day you wake up, you're like, am I going to go here? Am I going to wear this jacket or this jacket? Am I going to wear that shirt? Am I going to put on these socks? That's what you want, right?
Yeah,
and all the choices are what makes just people go kind of crazy. But anyway, good point.
So I think your role, though, is to meaning Pinnacle, and the kind of your gift is to take all that noise and extrapolate the critical stuff so that people can make a decision. Right? I mean, that's ultimately what it boils down to. And so
That's right.
Right now, there's a lot of noise. There's tariff noise. There's trade noise. Now there's war noise that seems to be gearing up. And I was talking about this last week with the peer, saying that the noise is just out of control.
Yeah.
And so talk to us a little bit about how your organization specifically eliminates noise.
Yeah.
Because I think that's y'all's gift. Y'all step into these refineries, these 10,000 plants, all these moving pieces, and you give people the ability to make decisions with what Zeke asked about, right? You're the chat. It's the simplified version of here's all the crap you got going on. Do it this way, and you're going to make more money. How do you guys go about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I love to talk about this, not just about our business, but once again, how you think about it in life, right? Yeah. And so Pinnacle is a sort of a good anecdote or analogy to use for other areas of our lives. But the thing I'll come back to is, let's use that ChatGPT example again. Let's use something a little bit more important. Have you guys ever played with the ChatGPT health module? It's pretty interesting. You can load up your data. You can load up.
I heard that. I haven't used it.
Information. It comes back and tells you, hey man, your blood samples are here, and it'll give you some pretty impressive both diagnoses in terms of maybe not you've got this disease, but here's a couple of recommendations. It will, I think, but play with. I have not played with the health module enough to speak with this with certainty, but I play with other pieces of it. Like for example, I use it when I write. Believe it or not, I write Python code. And when I do, the easiest thing to do is not to write it from scratch. You go into ChatGPT, say, I need a Python code that builds a deep neural network like this, uses this many number of caras in your revolutions, and they'll write a code script for you.
Nice.
What it won't do, what are the odds that whatever I'm asking ChatGPT for, go back to the shoe example, what are the odds that it really gave me the right answer for me? You don't have to answer that, but think about it. Right. The odds are pretty low. Let's say use the running shoe example, or does this piece of code just right, or is all the analysis of its blood test that it's doing, what are the odds that it gave me the right answer? Let's say 1 in 10.
Right.
Well, where does it say on ChatGPT? There's a 90% chance that this answer is either incomplete or wrong.
Right.
It doesn't. It actually does say, to give them credit, they have disclaimers. Okay. Hey, ChatGPT can be wrong.
Right.
But it doesn't quantify the degree to which that they might
how
be
often
wrong.
are we wrong? Right.
So this is where a company like Pinnacle and when I talk about big business and industry and in our lives, this is probably the thing that we're missing the most of. You talk about noise.
Right.
That noise, in the Pinnacle, what we talk about is uncertainty.
Okay.
And use another business. Once again, if I'm a refinery out there are certain things that I can have fairly high confidence in. For example, I know the world's going to use gasoline. And if I look at the data, the world's going to use more and more of it every year. Now there's noise like, no. We're going to have electric cars and solar grids and wind farms. And there's some noise about that, but most people agree that's probably not right. There's noise about wars and tariff and all that kind of stuff. A lot of that I can't control. That's uncertainty. So how do I focus on the stuff I can control? And then say at the other side, man, there's a lot of uncertainty I can't control. And to quantify that is really magical. That's what Pinnacle does for our customers. And but to use that analogy again, going in the rest of the world, healthcare is probably the biggest one. How often are we going in, seeing a doctor, we're getting some prescription, some treatment? The error rates in medicine are staggeringly high, and we don't talk about it. The doctor didn't tell you, well, this is my prescription now, or this is my diagnosis.
Right.
And here's what I'm going to prescribe as treatment. There's a 76% chance I'm wrong.
And that's why I have insurance. So good luck and Godspeed, sir. Yeah.
Right? They don't
You're right.
hear that.
You're 100% right.
Well, I mean, the typical diagnostics for something is typically a route out. They go through, however many different things before they finally say, like they said, the typical autoimmune disease is almost 4 years before they finally figure out which one you have.
Yeah.
Because it's a process of elimination.
Yeah.
It's tons of wrongs. It's like, but they don't tell you in the beginning. They're like, by the way, this is going to be horrible for the next 4 years. We're going to be winging it,
Yeah.
And
so let's just use that.
We're excited to use you as our use case to figure out what the hell's going on here.
Exactly.
So in early tests that are being run, the AI models are faster and more accurate by an order of magnitude than doctors. Let's let that sit for a second. Ryan, are you telling me that I put in a bunch of symptoms and all my data, everything else, I'm going to get an answer faster and more accurate than going to the doctor? Yes, the early tests are showing that. And yet people are like, yeah, but man, the laws even say we can't use this stuff yet. Like ChatGPT and those others, there are laws that say they can't prescribe because you have to have FDA approval and everything else. And yet, but the doctors, it's not the doctors are bad people. They're doing the best they can, but it's built on an antiquated system. And yet we're not asking the hard question, well, why are we trusting? We have a problem with the error rate in the analytics, but we accept the error rate in a human being. Why is that?
Right.
It's kind of mind-blowing. But once again, in refineries every day, this is what we do. Now, luckily for us, we're not working on human beings. We're working on pressure vessels and pumps and pipes and that sort of thing. So there we can be a lot more objective. But man, that gets back to this human decision-making, how we feel about decisions, the simple answer, the fact that I trust Jason to say nice things about my book and may have messed that up. But anyway,
that's the next episode, folks. We'll run it back.
Anyway, I'm getting long-winded, but that is
give you a whole
fundamental
commercial. Actually, After this, I'm going to do a whole commercial. We're going to plug it in. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say this is sort of the fundamental thing that we are dealing with, not just in industry, but as a society, is how we think about these decisions we make and understanding where there's uncertainty. And even though something might be new and scary, and uncertain, it may be a lot better than what we're used to, but we are slow to change because it's what we're used to.
But even the data you're providing, let's use your example, to some leadership in a plant, they have to make the decision to do something with it, right?
Yes.
To eliminate the risk. Okay, here's some risk. Here's some external factors we can't control, but steel prices may go up because tariffs, because of war, because of whatever.
Yeah.
So this is what we recommend. They can still say, go pound sand if they want to, I suppose.
They can. Let's get super specific, and this is interesting because this could be a human being, but I'm going to use back to my refinery example. What our dashboard does is it shows up and says, Mr. Plant Manager, you've got 30,000 different machines in your plant, pipes, exchangers, pressure vessels, whatever. And these 30,000 pieces of equipment, these machines are all doing something so that you bring crude oil in the front, send gasoline, jet fuel, kerosene out the back. And right now in your plant, based on the data that we have, this is the number one asset that's going to cause you downtime in the next 5 years. What's interesting is at that point, humans are really good. When you say that asset, okay, Ryan, that pressure vessel or that pump is my number one likely problem. Yes. Now I can get a team together. We'll go solve that one. Then we go to the next one. Then we go to the next one.
Nice.
That is unique because in the old school ways, it was I've got some gigantic risk matrix. It's 5 by 5, and there are 1,422 in the top risk bucket. Well, what do I do with the 1,422? Human beings are terrible about that.
Right.
So what we're doing is we're trying to use the data to sift down to the one to focus on, and teams can get very focused very fast. Imagine if that was the way it was in healthcare. The system eliminates down to, okay, we've eliminated to your autoimmune thing. We've eliminated cancer. We've eliminated digestive issues. We've eliminated viruses and bacteria, blah, blah, blah. Hey, man, we're down to it might be autoimmune. Man, I just skipped the first 2 years of that wasted time. I'm down to hone in on the decision. So that's how we're using data in industrial applications, and I think it's going to have far-reaching impacts across lots of spaces.
So I knew that when we had you on the show, AI seems to be a massive topic. I mean, just everyone's trying to figure out how to use it. Those that aren't adopting it are going to get left behind. That's just a fact.
They already are behind. Maybe it's moving so fast.
I've become a massive fan of it. Love it. I'm using it every day. Except for when I try to figure out how to do a podcast and not screw it up. But I asked it this morning, how do I not screw this up? But,
See?
But
The disclaimer: sometimes ChatGPT is
One out
wrong.
of 10 times. But one thing that I knew you would do, because of the nature of your industry and also the nature of your brain, is that you would get out in front of it, right? And so, how do you see Pinnacle? Well, let me ask. The first question is how are you guys adopting it?
Mm-hmm.
Because you guys were. I hate to say this, but you were probably AI before AI was cool. I mean, if you really think about it.
Predictive analytics. That's really what it is, right?
That's what that was. So before AI was
sure.
doing all this, so how have you? How are you using it to optimize Pinnacle's ability to do their job?
Mm-hmm.
And then also, how are you doing it in a way that is? I guess my question is all that risk stuff that you have to then analyze to make sure it was right.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that work in your world? Because
Yeah.
you just stated it. Hey, it might be wrong. So how do you skirt that line between leveraging it
Yeah.
for your team? Because I know there's been a lot of risk talk out there because people are taking data. Engineers are taking stuff and going and doing ChatGPT to get that part of the project done. And the question is, did they check their work?
Yeah.
So how do you build the systems and process to leverage it,
Yeah.
but also not have it take over to the point that it puts you at risk because your team's not final stamping it or doing the right procedures? Because I know you guys specialize in that. It's really that's your brand.
Yeah.
Right. So how
That's
does that go? How do you guys go about doing that? Because it's a big shift.
Couple answers to this question, and you're right. We're blessed in that we've been doing this so long that we know we have the ability to test artificial intelligence. And let's use AI in a very broad sense. So when people say AI, most people don't really know what they're talking about. That's sort of a general term. For example, a calculator is AI, right? The old linear math calculator. But when you talk about what people think of today, when they think of ChatGPT or OpenAI or Google Gemini, they're thinking about this generative AI. And really what I'm going to do is I'm going to parse this in a couple of buckets. You might have heard people use this is a geek term, structured and unstructured data. You've heard those terms thrown around. And without getting into the weeds here, that's a fairly long conversation. We have the ability to with structured data, we're going to use machine learning. You may have heard that term before. Sure. Machine learning is a subset of AI in which you're using what are actually fairly old approaches. Like when you were in college and you had to take that one class where they talked about regression analysis. Regression analysis has been around 100 years. It's statistical math. But when you talk about machine learning, you're doing this in iterative ways, using both unstructured and unstructured data. But you've got very defined ways of looking at that data that are I won't say timeless, but are basically timeless. But then you can check the outputs against what you've seen. So, hey, we'll test this on a set of data 5 years old compared to what we actually see today, and how accurate is it? And we're learning, right?
Yeah.
In unstructured data, where you don't have test cases, you're more just synthesizing across a larger and larger sample set. And now the bigger the sample set, in theory, the more accurate you would be. But of course, it depends on what things might be skewing your outputs. Things like you'll hear about natural language processing or large language models, where they're going into unstructured. Someone just wrote an article, and all of a sudden that's now feeding into this model as well.
Right.
We use that. But we use those tools in very narrow ways at Pinnacle. So we know these are areas where we can extract information, say from written down history of assets, pull some information, turn it into data, compare that with our machine learning algorithms and what we call our first principles engineering, like force equals mass times acceleration.
Oh, there you go.
Put all those into one answer, and then when we give that to the customer, we've got a lot of various ways we're looking at the data. So we're not just trusting the AI.
Nice.
We're comparing it against a pretty large sample set. And once again, we've been doing this a long time, so we know what right is, and we even have human beings check it sometimes to make sure. Now, having said all that, let's use a example closer at home for most people. Let's say you want to build a new deck behind your house, okay? And you say, ChatGPT, build me a deck behind my house. And ChatGPT will do it. It will tell you, here's a plan to build a deck. It'll say, man, it'll ask you how big do you want the deck to be and how much weight do you think it's going to hold? And it'll do this kind of thing. And it'll say, okay, you're going to need to pour some concrete footers, and they need to be this deep and this wide. And it'll even get into some rebar spec. I did this because we built a new dock at our place in Tennessee. And ChatGPT gave me the full design, even gave me a 3D model of it.
Wow.
Interestingly enough, it was crazy.
Right.
What I found fascinating was that when it gave me the 3D model of the plan, that the joists, so there were joists going across with the deck boards, except that the joist sat on top of the deck board.
Uh-huh.
You're like, slight error in
slight,
the plan there,
right.
OpenAI, right?
Yeah.
Now, anybody would look at that and say, I know that answer's wrong. Who would know that their rebar design was wrong?
Oops.
right?
Yeah.
Now, it looked right. Now, I knew that the rebar size was too small, but it was interesting that it got me there faster. But a human being had to know that's not the right rebar size for that pier I need to pour. So it's back to your question. There's an example at home that, man, anybody would have enough knowledge to know that the deck board sitting underneath the joist was not the right design. You'd hope. But
tripping hazard, you call that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's a very long answer to say, Jason, man, this is where we are still trying to get good at knowing who really has the knowledge to check the models and check the output, right? And so we are trying to do all that at the same time to give our customers answers fast. And we're probably doing it faster than anybody else in the world. And yet we are very diligent about it because sometimes we don't know. Not us, but a lot of people don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, in simple terms, you're adding AI is just another person at the table, right? You've got people at the table. You got another advisor. You're not just sitting that person there by himself. You've got trusted, credentialed.
What I hear is experts.
Yeah,
You still need
there you
experts.
go.
At the end of the day, you need experts to check the work, right? And so you can use that to simplify things, but I'm not going to go build a deck.
Well, we need experts forever, right? I mean,
Well, and so it's not replacing the need for somebody who can measure that and go, that AI screwed that up. Right?
And what
had you used the wrong rebar, right?
Yep.
And it wasn't such a, you didn't have a contractor bless that thing. Now you got a big problem, and something that the naked eye wouldn't see. So you guys are still leveraging that to be able to go in. So it's only enhancing it.
We are.
Still the need for why people need you.
The power, yes, and the power is that it's got to be the right experts. If you pick somebody that just, I'm just a concrete rebar guy, then I'm just going to say, see, ChatGPT, you don't know what they're talking about, so it's baloney.
Right.
No, you got to be, we got to iterate and make the model better and better faster.
Right.
So our experts, as you call them, are constantly, I'm one of these, is working to make that model faster and faster so the next time it gives me the right answer. And then it gives me, and so I still, our people and even the people working the plants every day, yes, we still have to have those people. Someone's got to turn a wrench.
Right.
ChatGPT's not going to do that. But I want to get to the answer faster. Back to the healthcare example. I don't want to spend 4 years trying to diagnose autoimmune. I want to get there in 3 months. And so I'm trying to get the models to get better and better so that when I finally do get to the point where I know it's not an autoimmune disease and now I'm trying to figure out treatment, that's where doctors are really good. Knowing what the problem is, figuring out treatment, doctors are really good. I just want to get through that 4-year iterative process super fast. And the more we iterate with those models, the better we're going to get.
So I feel like there's a new thing that you should be out speaking on.
Okay.
And it should be AI and leveraging it. I don't know if you have a marketing person. No, I'm kidding. I know you do. But you've got to get them to put you on the docket to go out and start talking about how people can start leveraging in their industry. Because
here's me, ChatGPT. ChatGPT, this is what a hand looks like.
On top of everything it is that you do, because I know you guys have, the way that you're speaking in it, you're leveraging it for your organization, and I know that it's such a hot topic. Mm-hmm. I'm sure people are trying to figure out, how do I go about doing this? Mm-hmm. What are the means by which you take it? And what kind of experts are leveraging this technology out there? I'm sure there's refineries out there that are trying to solve the solution as to how to do it. You could come along beside them, having already leveraged the technology because it's part of your DNA.
Certainly not to be afraid of it, not to fear it, which that's out there, right? It's fearing it. It's not Terminator yet, guys. Relax. We're okay.
Now. Typically, you're invited almost, I think every year that I've been there, you're pretty much at the GCIF, the Gulf Coast Industry Forum.
Yeah.
It's kind of a signature event for this organization. It is the signature event for this organization. And really one
Pinnacle event, if you will.
That's well placed. That's
recovering those book sales.
Recovering the book sales. Exactly. I know you're probably on the docket this year. I haven't seen the agenda, but I'm guessing that you're on the docket. So can you give us a sneak peek as to maybe what our audience maybe is going to get to hear about?
Your audience is going to think that we staged this. So I'm going to have to say, yes, I am on the docket. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be speaking about AI adoption. A lot of what we're talking about today is a preview. I'm going to use some specific examples, but this is exactly the topic. And Chad,
serious?
Yeah, and Chad Berger and I talked about this because he said, man, it's weird. In the last couple of years, it went from everyone was like, yeah, there's some voodoo going on out there that we might want to talk about. Now it's like everyone's talking about it.
Absolutely.
So it's interesting how I've been at, as you said, GCI. I think this will be my 11th year to speak there. They're always gracious to have me back. And this year, this is exactly what I'll be talking about.
Fantastic.
How we use this stuff.
Well, we're nearing the time of the show, and so before we wrap up, is there anything specifically that we didn't capture today that you'd like to make sure that we captured before we get out of here?
Yeah.
Highlight.
Man, you guys ask great questions. What I would say, and Zeke, you said a minute ago, there is a lot of fear out there still, and there's a healthy balance between, and we keep talking about AI, and I'm picking on ChatGPT, but you can pick on even just just the internet, right? Like, let's face it, you could go on and get really crappy answers to a lot of questions long before OpenAI came around, right?
100%.
And there's something weird. I think you think about the fact there's something weird about when you had to go in and Google would return you a bunch of articles. So the human nature was, okay, I'll click on this first article. This one doesn't make sense. But when ChatGPT gives you a very human-like response,
right.
we're probably we're scrutinizing that a little bit less. The point is, it's a healthy fear. And so I'll end with, or back to it, just layer on another time. Man, it's a good time for us to be saying these things are going to be around. They're going to be tools we're going to use. And whether you're a commercial contractor building buildings and decks, you're a healthcare professional, you're a reliability company serving big industry, man, all of us have got to figure out how these play in our spheres. And rather than being, to your point, Zeke, scared of it, I think it's something to say, let me try stuff. Right? Let me see what works. Let me wonder, do I need to ask that question differently? Where does this help me get faster?
Exactly.
And where is it a burden? So the thing I would leave to everybody is, man, it's not going to replace humans. It is going to change the way we work a lot, though. And that I know for a lot of people that's scary. And I think the number one industry that's probably going to affect eventually will be healthcare. In some ways that are going to scare some people, but are also going to save a lot of lives. And so let's be ambitious about it and cautious at the same time. And I think we're going to have a great future.
Love it. And then pro tip for anybody that's listening, but you kept using the term saying ChatGPT, right? There's a lot of different AI sources out there. Is that the one that you've adopted and that you still, have you gone out and measured which one am I going to
Great question.
Champion for our organization? Which one have
So
you guys leveraged?
we do not use any of the open source AI tools
Okay.
in Pinnacle's algorithms to serve customers.
Got it.
I use ChatGPT because the main thing I use it for is software development, writing code.
Oh, cool.
And it's and the other ones I think are just as good, but I got comfortable with the ChatGPT code development module.
Gotcha.
So it tracks variables for you and tracks code revisions for you. So it's really easy to use. But man, I would say that these days, in fact, I got guys in our shop that say, nah, Ryan, Gemini, Google's tool is better than this one. Okay.
Sure.
So,
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's-
Well, they're building it into Microsoft now.
Right.
When you use Microsoft 365, you're using an AI tool as well. It's
absolutely.
partnered up to it.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
people are using it without probably even knowing that they're using as much as they are.
Yeah.
Well, Ryan, you're always, we could do hours with you. And so, and I know with your calendar and all the things that you're being asked to do on a regular basis, just getting down here to join us today was amazing. So we're just humbled and grateful to have you with us today. Zeke, any last
I'm
thing?
good, man. Thanks for being here. Appreciate you.
Glad
as
to do
always.
it. Thanks
Yeah,
for having me.
So with that, Ryan, we do appreciate you joining us today. And as far as our audience, we do want to thank you for tuning in as you always do, being faithful and loyal to us. I know this one, and we're hoping the Ryan Sitton podcast blows up the internet and
The global audience.
global audience that we breaks the record.
That's right.
Yeah, we were aspiring. This one's going to break the record for the most views. So we're banking on that. And then at the same time, make sure you start planning now for GCIF because Ryan's going to be a speaker there this year. We want to make sure we acknowledge that, and you got to get out to support them. And if you ever have any questions, Ryan, we didn't capture this. If someone's paying attention to this, maybe somebody from the refinery, somebody that really somebody's saying, probably need to consult with Ryan and get a better feel for him or his organization, how they might be able to add us value. How do they reach your organization? What's the best way to reach out and get in contact with you guys?
There's different website's always easy.
Yeah,
it's just pinnaclereliability.com altogether. And
Okay,
they can connect with me directly. I'm on LinkedIn, and my email address is public. It's ryan.sitton@pinnaclereliability.com. So
Perfect.
yeah, anybody who wants to reach out would love to hear from you.
Right. Great voice of a leader, willing to go be that transparent. So fantastic stuff. So again, as always, we thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions or feedback, you can message myself directly, Jason Lee, or Zeke Smith on LinkedIn. Easiest way to track us down.
Yep.
Other than that, we'll see you guys next week.